The farm had been in the Turner family for generations, a sprawling stretch of fertile land just outside the city's edge. To most, it was a symbol of tradition, an anchor in a rapidly changing world. To Jonathan Turner, it was more than family heritage, it was home. After years of working his way through the ranks of aviation, Jonathan had achieved one of the most demanding and respected positions in the nation, Director of the Federal Aviation Administration. His life revolved around ensuring safe skies and lawful aviation practices. But for him, the farm was where he could escape, recharge, and reconnect with his roots. That peace shattered the day the Homeowners Association, newly formed by an ambitious group of developers and wealthy residents nearby, set their eyes on his property. They had been working to transform the quiet countryside into what they described as a luxury aviation community, a gated development complete with private hangars and its own runway. For them, Jonathan's farm was simply in the way, a large, flat piece of land they believed they could carve up to suit their plans. It began innocently enough. Jonathan received letters from the HOA filled with corporate language about community improvement and shared prosperity. He ignored them, knowing his property was legally outside their jurisdiction. The farm wasn't part of their development, and their authority held no weight. But the letters became more aggressive, demanding access, proposing partnership agreements, and finally threatening eminent domain claims they didn't have the legal authority to enforce. Then, one morning, Jonathan woke to the sound of heavy machinery. From his porch, he could see bulldozers tearing through a section of his outer fields. Stakes marked the outlines of what looked unmistakably like a landing strip. The HOA hadn't just threatened, they had acted. Without permission, without permits, and without the slightest regard for his rights, they had broken ground on his farm as if it were theirs to take. Neighbors watched with excitement. Many had bought into the idea of private planes at their disposal and a runway just minutes from their driveways. To them, Jonathan was merely an obstacle to progress. They didn't know who he was. They didn't realize the man whose farm they were desecrating wasn't just a farmer. They were challenging the very person who oversaw every piece of airspace in the United States. Jonathan didn't rush down to stop them. Instead, he stood silently for a while, measuring his response. His instincts from years of leadership told him one thing: patience. In aviation, rash decisions lead to disaster. Precision, timing, and adherence to law always won in the end. And so he began documenting photos of the machinery, videos of the crews tearing up his crops, records of the unauthorized construction. He gathered everything with the same meticulous care that had made him successful in his career. Within days, Jonathan filed formal reports, not as a farmer, but as the director of the FAA. His office launched a federal investigation into unauthorized runway construction. What the HOA had brushed off as community development was, in fact, a direct violation of federal aviation law. Constructing an airstrip required extensive permits, safety studies, environmental approvals, and clearance from the FAA. By bulldozing Jonathan's land, they had crossed into dangerous territory. The investigation unfolded quickly. Inspectors arrived, carrying federal authority that superseded any local board or developer. They walked the land, interviewed the construction crews, and subpoenaed HOA documents. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. The HOA had bypassed every regulation, had no authorization whatsoever, and had misled residents into funding the project with false promises of guaranteed FAA approval. When the findings were made public, panic erupted in the neighborhood. The runway project wasn't just illegal, it was a liability. Residents who had invested money into the development realized they had been scammed. Some faced potential fines themselves for supporting unauthorized construction. The HOA board, once smug and overbearing, now scrambled to shift blame and deny involvement. But the evidence was undeniable. Jonathan remained composed throughout, never raising his voice or showing anger. His power didn't come from threats. It came from the law, from the undeniable authority of his position. When the board tried to argue that they were just trying to improve the community, Jonathan countered with a simple fact: they had endangered lives. An unauthorized runway wasn't a harmless project. It was a potential disaster waiting to happen, one that could cause collisions, accidents, and chaos in controlled airspace. The federal ruling was swift. The HOA was fined millions of dollars for violations. Their board members held personally accountable for damages. The unauthorized construction was ordered to be dismantled, every bulldozer track erased, every stake pulled from the soil, and the farm, scarred by their arrogance, was restored at the HOA's expense. But the punishment didn't stop there. With Jonathan's evidence and federal oversight, lawsuits poured in from deceived residents. The HOA collapsed under financial and legal pressure. Its members resigned in disgrace, and the development's ambitious aviation dream evaporated overnight. What had begun as a plan to build a private runway ended as a cautionary tale of greed, arrogance, and ignorance. Through it all, Jonathan never gloated. He didn't need to boast about who he was or what position he held. His quiet resolve, his calm confidence, and his unshakable reliance on law and order had done more damage to the HOA than any confrontation ever could. He didn't have to raise his voice or his fist. His knowledge and authority spoke louder than anything else. For the community, the message was clear. They had underestimated a man who had spent his life mastering the skies. They had treated him as just another landowner, another obstacle to push aside. Instead, they had challenged the very person responsible for ensuring that aviation in America remained safe and lawful. It was not just a mistake, it was their downfall. The farm, once again quiet, bore the marks of resilience. Crops were replanted, fences repaired, and the land healed. Jonathan walked the fields with the same calm pride he always had, knowing that no HOA, no board, no group of arrogant neighbors could ever strip away what was his. They had tried to build a runway through his farm, but in the end, they had run headfirst into the one man in the country who had the power to ground them for good.